Hi! So, we're going to be talking about the Zodiac Killer. I spent a lot of research time on this, and I think I have a pretty accurate sense of the case and everything that happened. Okay, so, starting off, the Zodiac Killer is a very famous unsolved murder case because they never figured out who it was. He killed within the late 1960s and early 1970s. He claimed to have killed 37 people, but there's only 4 confirmed murders that we know of. So, we don't really know if that's true or not. He also really liked puzzles. He, wrote letters, wrote, different codes to people to try and figure out. That'll come in later. We'll get to all of this. Don't worry, I have a lot to talk about. His first confirmed murder was on December 20th, 1968 in Vallejo, California. 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen were found dead in David's station wagon on Lake Herman Road at around 11:20 p.m. Stella Borges was on her way to pick up her son from a show when she noticed the station wagon. Now, Lake Herman Road was known as a lover's lane, where couples would go to hang out, and I'm not really going to elaborate on that, because I think you know what I mean. Anyways, they were hanging out in a parked car. Stella noticed that there was something unusual about the station wagon. When she drove closer to it, she noticed that the driver's side door was wide open, and David was hanging out of it. She also saw that the station wagon had bullet holes all over it, and it was covered in blood. Within further inspection, she found Betty Lou Jensen around 30 feet away from the car, laying on the ground. Both individuals appeared to have been shot. Since this was the late 1960s, Stella had to go to the nearest police station to report the murders, the people that were dead, because they didn't have cell phones or anything. And a person driving on the road had seen the couple alive at 11:14, but saw that a mid-sized dark car, was just pulling up to them, and we can only assume that this was the Zodiac Killer coming to kill them. Authorities officially arrived at the scene at 11:28 p.m. Officers did confirm that this had not been a self-inflicted death, meaning that neither David or Betty did the killing, and I think it was officially a homicide. Betty had been shot 5 times in the heart, the liver, and her right kidney, and was pronounced dead on the scene. David was barely alive when help arrived, but on the way to the hospital, they discovered that he had a nasty gunshot wound in his head. I believe, from what I've read, it was in this area. It was right behind his ear. Just not. I don't think that'd be very fun. And he died on the way to the hospital. So now going back to the station wagon. Police had found shell casings around the car from what we now know was a .22 caliber gun with Winchester Western Super X ammunition. And I have written down, try saying that 3 times fast. It's a mouthful. So the attacker had also left almost no evidence at the scene, so the case pretty much went cold. And also just to note that in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't very common to have much violence. So this shooting was very odd to authorities and the public.
The second murder happened on July 4th, 1969, to 19-year-old Michael and 22-year-old Darlene. They were hanging out in a car near Blue Rock Spring Park, which is weirdly only a few miles away from Lake Herman Road. It is also another well-known lover's lane type of deal. The two were enjoying themselves when a strange man came up to the vehicle, left, and then came back a few minutes later. When the man came back, he pulled out a very bright flashlight and shot the two. Once the man thought the two were dead, he started to walk away. But then Michael started screaming, so the man, or the Zodiac Killer, came back to finish the job. When officials arrived at the scene, both individuals were found to still be alive. Later on, Michael survived, but unfortunately, Darlene had passed on the way to the hospital. When officers arrived, they found the car's headlights, turning signal, and the radio all still on. Michael told the authorities that the man had a brown car. He also described the attacker as a white male, around 26 to 30 years of age, 5'8", at least 200 pounds, light brown curly hair, and a larger face. Nobody connected the two murders together until they received a phone call at 12:40 from somebody claiming to be the murderer of both murders. The 911 dispatcher described the voice as cold and flat. Police were able to trace the phone call back to a payphone, but by the time they got there, the caller was gone.
On August 1st, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicles, San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald received the same handwritten letters from the Zodiac Killer. The letters had specific details on the two murders, proving that it really was the true killer. In these letters, the Zodiac also included a code. He said that if you could break the code, then you would find out who he was. A week later, Donald and Betty Hardin of Salinas, California, cracked the code. The code read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. The best part of it is when I die, I will be reborn into paradise, and all that I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collection of slaves for my afterlife." And then a bunch of gibberish words. He was also not very good at spelling. On August 7th, the San Francisco Examiner got a letter from the Zodiac saying, "Dear editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." This was the first time that he referred to himself as the Zodiac. Going back to the first murders, it appeared that the Zodiac didn't have a motive. For many other killers, they have weird things they do to the bodies or crime scene. It's very common for killers to take something that belonged to the person as a trophy. But the Zodiac would just kill people and leave.
The third murder occurred on September 27th, 1969, to 20-year-old Brian and 22-year-old Cecilia. They were having a picnic on the shores of Lake Berryessa when Cecilia spotted something very strange. She noticed a man in an executioner-style hood staring at her from behind a tree. He had a circle with a cross through it stitched onto his chest. This symbol later became the Zodiac's signature. He had a gun, knife, and rope with him. The man came up to the couple and told them that he had just escaped prison and all he wanted was money and a car. The man then tied the two up with the rope. Brian had begged the killer to kill him first because he couldn't stand watching the girl be killed. The Zodiac Killer agreed and stabbed Brian 6 times in the back, and then proceeded to stab Cecilia 10 times in the back. Both made it to the hospital, but Cecilia's injuries were very bad, and she later died in the hospital. Brian, however, lived to tell the tale. He described the man as around 5'11" and 170 pounds. Brian could also see brown hair through the eye holes of the hood. Brian had also told reporters that he initially didn't believe he was going to make it, but he decided to fight for his life. He said that he made goals in order to continue.
Mind was able to work that well under those conditions. You really did an exceptional job in that.
Well, through the whole thing, like I mentioned before, at the beginning, I did think I was going to die. And so from that moment on, one has to have certain goals that you have to set. The first goal, of course, was to live. I suppose the second goal was to get untied. The next one was to get help. From getting help, getting to the hospital. You know, you have to have a successive set of goals. And if you can keep this going and you can keep your mind active, whether you die or not, you're at least psychologically attuned, whether you're in shock or not. If you can keep arguing with yourself, praying, doing anything to keep your mind off of yourself, or at least just not lapsing back and just saying, well, it's no use.
When officials were investigating the scene, they would find a message on the side of Brian's car. It had the dates of the previous murders, and under the most recent murder, it said, by knife. About an hour after the attack, police received a phone call from the Zodiac, claiming to be responsible for the murder. Police then traced the phone call back to a payphone located a few miles away from the station. There was no reliable DNA found on the payphone, though, that they could use.
On October 11th, 1969, 29-year-old Paul Stine was working as a cab driver when he picked up the Zodiac Killer. A teenage eyewitness watched as the Zodiac shot the driver. They then saw the killer look over the body, get out of the car, wipe down the car, and then walk off. When police arrived at the scene, they found bloody fingerprints in the car. Later on, in a letter from the Zodiac, he would say that he was leaving fake clues to confuse the police. This may be true, but many people believe that he left a fingerprint, realized it later, and wrote a letter to cover it up. Whatever it was, it worked. Police never determined if the fingerprint was his or not. The eyewitness, however, described the killer as 5'8" to 5'9", 200 pounds, 25 to 30 years of age, stocky with reddish-brown hair, a crew cut, and glasses with thick rims. With this description, officials were able to make a composite sketch of the killer. Police were sent out to look for the attacker. They came across a man that looked exactly like the sketch. They stopped the man and then amazingly asked him if he had seen anybody that looks like the composite sketch. The man said yes and pointed in front of him. Cops then let the man go and went on a search for the person this man was talking about. About a month later, police received a letter from the Zodiac, and he confirmed that it was him who killed Paul Stine. The letter also contained a part of Paul's shirt. Within the letter, he mentioned that 2 cops should get fired because they messed up big time. The person they had stopped during the Paul Stine murder had actually been the Zodiac Killer. And it has been rumored that this happened because of miscommunication between authorities and I don't know who else, but between each other. And they thought that they were looking for a black man instead of a white man. Within the same letter, the Zodiac mentioned how he would go for school buses next. The letter included diagrams of bombs that could be used on buses. This sent authorities into a panic. They started changing bus routes every day, and police would follow buses, small planes would fly over the schools, many people volunteered to act as guards, and they even took things to the extreme in making an entire task force. The force's job was to figure out who the Zodiac was. In March of 1970, Kathleen Jones and her baby were driving on the highway at night in San Francisco. Somebody then pulled up beside her and motioned for her to pull over. When she pulled over, a man came out and said that there was something wrong with her tire and that he could fix it. The man then went over to her tire, started messing with it, and then gave her the right of way to start driving again. Whatever he did, it didn't work, and right when she started to drive, the wheel completely fell off. So then the man offered to take her and her baby to get the car fixed. Once she got in the car, the man immediately started threatening her and her baby, telling her that she was going to be next and that he was going to kill her. However, during this, he made a mistake in directions and had to pull over and turn around. This gave Kathleen the perfect opportunity to jump out to safety. So, she jumped out of the car and ran to a nearby field with her baby and laid as flat as possible, like a pancake. The Zodiac looked for her for a few minutes, but eventually left so drivers wouldn't get suspicious and catch him. I think that Kathleen was insanely smart in this situation because he couldn't see her at all. She was apparently wearing really dark clothing, so if she just laid in that field, she had a perfect hiding space.
Now on to the suspects. It was Lawrence Kane. Lawrence Kane had worked in the same Lake Tahoe hotel as Donna Lass. She may have been another Zodiac victim and disappeared in 1970. In 1962, Kane was involved in a car accident where he got brain damage. Brain damage can lead to personality changes. As time went on, his behavior was becoming more and more odd. Since his name was 4 letters, it fit the name code. Darlene's sister claimed that Kane had harassed Darlene in the weeks leading up to her murder. Kathleen Jones had recognized him and thought that he could have possibly been the Zodiac, but police eventually ruled him out as a suspect. Another one was Gary Francis Post. After one of the murders, there was a heel print found that had apparently matched that of him. The facial markings also, in the police sketch of the killer, appeared to match the scars that he had gotten from a car accident. He also randomly killed 5 people and severely wounded another 2 during his spree. Now on to the biggest suspect, Arthur Leigh Allen. He was the only suspect that had been publicly named for the case of the Zodiac Killer. He was a school teacher in Vallejo, California, something like that. And he had been reportedly to have told a friend at the beginning of 1969 about an idea he had for a book called Zodiac, who killed couples, taunts the police, and signs letters with the symbol on his watch. The night of the first murders, Allen had told his family he was going to go scuba diving at Lake Berryessa, and when he came home, he was drenched in blood and had a bloody knife in his car. During a police interview, Allen had mentioned how much he had loved the book, The Most Dangerous Game, by Richard Connell, which was about a man who hunted couples and would carry a gun and knife. The title had also appeared in one of the letters from the Zodiac. Police decided that they had enough evidence to search his home. They found dead animals cut up, separated into bags, in his freezer. A little while later, he was convicted of child molestation and was sentenced to 3 years in jail. Consequently, at the time he was in jail was when the Zodiac had stopped writing letters. When Michael was asked to pick a person who looked like the Zodiac, he picked Arthur, letting police do another investigation on his house, where they found formulas for bombs and tapes about the Zodiac Killer. The DNA on the stamps from the Zodiac did not match up with Arthur's, though. They were also able to get one palm print from the Zodiac's letter, which didn't match Arthur's. Arthur's fingerprints also did not match the bloody fingerprint from the car of Paul Stein. His handwriting was also not a match to the Zodiac's, and he didn't look that much like the composite sketch, so they ruled him out.